Tuples are a .NET 4 feature available in all of the .NET languages, including C#4. Among other uses, tuples allow you to easily and temporarily group objects together into a logical unit without having to create an explicit class. In this lesson, I'll show you the mechanics of using tuples and then an example of how they might be used. There are two ways to define a tuple. The first way is like this. Let's say we have a customer and we just say tuple. And then here you define all of the types that are in your tuple collection, so to say. And that would be his ID, his first name, and his last name. And that's your tuple. So as you can see, it's kind of like a class or a class that you just created on the fly, only that you don't have names for the fields. If you want to print, for instance, the first and the last name, you would do this, customer1 dot, and then you have item 1, 2, and 3. So we could say item 2 plus customer 1 item 3. And if you run that, you see that you need to put a capital I and run it. And you see that it prints those values. The other syntax you can use to define a tuple is like this. Customer2 equals tuple create, and the same type definition, and then the same as above. Like that. The advantage of the second way is that you get type inference, so you don't have to type all the types, like this. Customer3 equals tuple create, and then simply so C# infers that this is an integer, for instance, and we can see that if we say, for instance, write line 5 plus customer3 and then the first item, and 5 plus 45, since they're both integers, you can add them, is 50, and if we run it, we see 50. So here we saw we have 3 items in the tuple, and here's 3 and here's 3. It makes you wonder, how many can you have? And the answer is 8, but on the 8th one you can have more by putting in a new tuple. So if we have, for instance, customer 4, and then we have a tuple that we create, and here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the last one is a tuple itself, and we create that as 8, 9, 10. We have 10 items in our tuple, even though we only had or have 8 items in a tuple, so to say. If you want to get any of these 3 items out, you would do it like this. Let's print out 10, customer 4, and then rest. And the rest is the rest of the tuples. Item 1, and then item 3 of item 1. This is the third item of item 1 of rest. And so if we show this, we see that it does print the 10. So what would be a realistic scenario for using tuples? One is, let's say you have a number of classes lying around, like customers, employees, meeting rooms, and lists of topics, and you want to quickly be able to create meetings. You could either create a meeting class, which would have a bit of overhead, but if you don't want that overhead, if you just want to create it very quickly, you can use a tuple and pack in all of the objects that you need to be in that group meeting. Let me show you how that would look. So let's delete all of this here. And first let's put in our classes. So let me copy in these dummy classes here. I have a meeting room with an ID, name, room number, square feet, and you pass in the ID. An employee, ID, first name, last name, pass in the ID, and customer, ID, first name, last name, pass in the ID. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we need to create a meeting in our application, but we don't want to create a whole class for it. Just very quickly put them together. So we'll say var meeting, and we'll put all of these objects together. Let's see, what do we need? A customer comes to the meeting, an employee comes to the meeting, they have to meet in a meeting room, and they will have a list of topics, and these topics are going to be strings. Or those are the objects. And now we can define the customer. We'll pass it an ID, and new employee, pass it an ID, and new meeting room, pass it an ID, and new list of strings. And these are strings, for instance, next month's budget, or I mean these are topics, possible merger, topics that the customer and employee in the meeting room will be talking about, new employees. So there we have our tuple. It was created very quickly on the fly. We didn't have to create a class for it. And let's say we want to get all of the topics of the meeting out of our tuple. We would access it like this. Let's display them all. Meeting, or here's one way to display them on one line. Meeting item 4, because this is 1, 2, 3, 4 is the list. And then show them all. So if we run this, we will see all of the topics. And so you could pick any of the objects out that you wanted. So in this lesson, you were introduced to tuples, a new feature of .NET 4 and C#4. Use them to create collections of objects on the fly, which represent some logical unit, but a unit which doesn't warrant the overhead of creating a full custom class.